One set of cards is enough?
No, that's fine. Let's do it like that, just like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very nice. Probably. Is it Tiff? It's probably going to rain. Hello. Oh. Are you cool with us posting the PowerPoint
Sure.
on our website?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It would be in the members only section.
Tim,
Mark.
do you have a place you want
he
me
makes
standing?
It on his little 3D printer. Is that the
Cool.
cutest thing ever?
Oh my gosh.
And it's like
it
it's all
opens.
it's accurate. Like there's little frames in it. I think the last one he made had little, yeah, see it's got a little clean excluder and little,
Oh my
little bitty
gosh.
frames. Is that adorable? It's perfect for teaching.
What's up?
At least I'm an honest thief.
Yes. You let me see it. If nobody else is coming in, I'm going to get started here. Okay, we're going to start in like 2 minutes. 2 minutos. Oh, we got somebody else coming in. Last minute Nelly there. All right, go get your second helping. We're going to start in like 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Mark Pomeroy, you made the little 3D printed hive, right? I'll have to show it to Brian. Is this the cutest thing? Did you see? It's even got like
You made these? Is that
little
right?
frames in it.
Cool.
Like he's got little frames. There's even a little queen excluder.
Nice.
Isn't that amazing? All right. It is 6:30. I hope you all got something good to eat. Welcome to the May 2024 meeting. Are we on? Okay. The May 2024 meeting of the Southeast Beekeeping Club. I'm Ann Atkinson. I'm your president. We have our board, and if you are in the board, I want you to just go ahead and stand up. We got Mark. Bryan is our past president. You met Janice and Veronica out in front, that's our treasurer and vice president. And I think the only one we're missing is Mike, our secretary, and Brian, or not Brian. Yeah, I know. Howard Kramer, and then Christy Weiler is sometimes a little late because of her schedule, but she should be here soon. Do we have anybody here that's brand new, has never been to one of our meetings? Please stand up. Yay. And Zoom or YouTube does not count. Only in-person counts. So you've never been to any of our meetings. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what your interest in bees is.
My name is Bryan Smith. I live in Parker. And I don't know, I just wanted to get some bees. It's not necessary. It's just a challenge of doing it. I'm a friend of mine who does it, and it helps the environment. Without bees, you don't have food.
That's right. Well, welcome.
It gets hotter.
All right. Well, thank you. Welcome. Anybody else that's brand new, never been here before? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Monique. I'm also in Parker. And just this last weekend, I got my first nuke. And my husband gave me a beehive for Christmas because I, too, have also just wanted the hobby of beekeeping. So I'm very much totally new at this.
All right. Well, welcome. Welcome. We're glad to have you. We have a guest speaker tonight, Bryan Zavada from the CSBA Sustainability Committee. And I want to get right to him, so we're going to put some of the things we normally do at the beginning off to the end. But I do want to make just a couple of quick announcements here. Be sure to put a few shekels in the donation jar out front. That helps Linda buy the materials we need for our potluck. Linda's husband, Jim Skalecki, is our librarian, and he very much wants you to look in your closet and see if you have any of our books. He has got a whole pile of cards that say people have checked out books from 22, for heaven's sake. So please, 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 if you have library books from us, please return them before by the next meeting. That's kind of our deadline, and if you would please, there's no fines will be assessed. Amnesty is all a blanket for everyone to bring your books back. Buyers beware. If you are getting used equipment, just a cautionary note. We've actually given some away. We're going to give some away tonight. If you're getting used boxes, just be clear that you are buying a potential problem. Make sure you do some scorching on the inside. If not, that will at least kill what's ever there. Any of you more seasoned beekeepers have any suggestions on how to deal with used equipment when you get it? Don't get it. Well, sometimes people give it to you and you need it. You start using it.
Can I add to that for a second?
Please,
I think
yes.
it's about being very wise about buying. Like there are situations where if you know the beekeeper, if the beekeeper is moving away or something like that,
responsible
or
beekeeping.
downsizing, you can make a much more calculated risk, because it is a risk for sure. But I think the more thought and intention you put into it, you can certainly minimize those risks.
Thank you. Yeah, he said it much better than I did. Okay.
Bees are still living in it.
Yeah, if bees are still, well, they could have foul brood though. They could. Yeah. We have a tradition that every month we give someone the Golden Bee Award, and they get to keep it for a month and bring it back. Gary got it last month. We were going to give it to Kenny Fuller, but I don't see him here tonight. Do you see him?
Yeah, and I have money that.
You have his money?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so he's going to find you. All right, very good. Well,
Drop it off on the way home.
oh, very good. All right. Well, please tell Kenny we appreciate all he's done for the club. He donated a lot of equipment for our apiary, and we just want to say thank you to him. And this means he has to come back to the next meeting to get a congratulations. Well, I'll let you fit that back in there. All right. And then Gary wanted to talk to us briefly about emergency preparation. So Gary, bring it Dial 911. What? Oh, Gary, wait. Hold up.
Picky. Oh,
Yeah, picky.
okay, well, in that case, I'll get on the backside. I've been doing emergency preparedness for about 15 years now. The rules have changed. What used to be what's called the wildland-urban interface involved properties in Colorado, 5 to 35 acres. The wildland-urban interface is now described as if you have a modern building, this one included, and you're next to an acre or more of unimproved ground, you're at that interface. Literally, the planet is burning from Canberra, Australia to Fort Collins, actually to Alaska, because they had one a couple years ago that was really bad. What I'm here to say is, if you get an advisory that says prepare for evacuation, pack your backside and get out of wherever you are, follow the directions, and please don't put the firefighters at risk trying to save you. What I do is I take care of large animals. I can do a good job of that. Most of our facilities are at fairgrounds. If you have ever been to a fairground, even the animals are uncomfortable. We don't have accommodations. So the best thing you can do is find a buddy. If you have vacant ground next to you, if you have a buddy or two, because sometimes the fire is in the wrong direction. I know a lady in Kiowa, she said, my plan was to go 83. That was the entrance route for the Black Forest fire. She said, I had to find another buddy. The point is, please be prepared. I have 3 things up here. One is a recipe for a vegetable fruit salad. One is a couple of stories about beekeeping that went awry. And the third packet is, I should have put the color on the front, but I didn't. The color packet is for all of you who live where you have an acre or more of vacant ground. Thank you for listening. Please be prepared.
So one of the things he has there is a go bag list, and I'll just tell you, my daughter is a diplomat with the Foreign Service, and she's posted to some very dangerous places. So they have a go bag. But in addition to what Gary has on the list, she also has whiskey and chocolate. So, yes.
As in the fires in California, the house burned down, and we had to go back. The thing we forgot to put in was underwear.
That Gary has underwear on his list. Yes.
Underwear is on the list.
Under-
Cash is on the list.
Cash and underwear. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good.
And a little bit of food won't hurt, because when we have to feed you, and we will for the first 72 hours, we'll probably put you on a school bus and take you to the local school. It ain't very good eating, but you'll survive.
Okay. All right. One more thing before we get to this, to Bryan, our guest speaker. Where'd it go? You may have seen out front, we have some little swarm hotline magnets. These have been provided to us by Colorado State Beekeeping Association. We want to distribute them far and wide to any agency or institution that might not know what to do if a swarm lands. I just last Friday, this is me collecting a swarm on a playground just over here in Parker. And so if you could take a couple of these, I've got a sign up front, grab however many you want, but please distribute them to your local schools, to your, if you have a fire department close to you, sheriff's department, police department. If you know a cop, hand this to them. It's just a little magnet. It's got the swarm hotline number on it, and that way they know who to call if they get a call for a swarm. Thank you, Larry. All right, with no further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Bryan Zavada. He is the chair of the Sustainability Committee for the Colorado, why is it not going? There. The Colorado Bar Association. He's got a lovely PowerPoint here.
You said the
I'm sorry,
Colorado
Colorado
Bar
Bar
Association.
I'm sorry.
I am definitely not the chair of that.
And I do apologize right now to anybody who gets an email from me that says attorney at law at the bottom. I try to make sure I give you the right signature block, but I'm trying to do two things at once here. Sorry about that. The Colorado State Beekeeping Association, CSBA. He's going to talk to us about bringing the research behind resistance among honeybees and how we can apply that research in our own apiaries. So,
Thank you,
Bryan,
Ann.
take it away.
Appreciate
And so
it.
to move, you should be able to just hit this arrow from this
Arrow,
thing.
perfect.
Or if not, just hit the next slide. So it didn't work just there.
Perfect. Right on. Well,
Thank
welcome
you.
everybody. My name is Bryan. Like Ann says, I like bees. I was elected to the state board as an advisor in November, so I'm just beginning my time as an advisor for the state. I just began as the sustainability chair as well. It's kind of a brand new committee, and the work I'm presenting here is definitely connected to that. I run about 50 colonies. I live in Lakewood, Colorado. I'm so fascinated by how close we live, but how different our environment is from a lens of beekeeping. Just driving down here, that's all I could think about as I left the C470 ring driving down, is that the environment seemed to feel more and more different. I've got swarms going daily in the Lakewood area, in the Denver metro area, and I get a sense that maybe you're behind here, that timing, is that right? Right. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and swarms are just starting here, as Ann's picture kind of presented. You know, in the metro area, we have that luxury of all of those trees. There's so many flowering trees. I was up here a little early. I took a nice drive down to that state park, Castlewood Canyon. What a beautiful area, but there's not a lot of trees that are great for pollinators. So help me out. What's the pollination like out here? Thank you, sir. Yeah, sure. This is an anomaly of a year, sir. So my first swarm this year was April 10th. Prior, we're talking like the end of April, April 29th has been my first swarm. Yeah, everything feels 3 weeks ahead from where I'm at in Lake already. How ridiculous is that? This is May 1st, so. So are you here in the Parker area as well? Are you about as that far ahead as I am in Lakewood? Yeah? Okay. Huge diversity, huh? Yeah. Really? Wow. So I've got pollen coming in, I think February 15th. I had pollen coming into my colonies in my backyard. So isn't it amazing? 50 minutes of a drive time. What a difference in the lens of a beekeeper you've got to put on. For me, I'm looking at all those great metro trees, and I'm thinking, I have a tree right across the street in my neighbor's front yard. That's one of those early silver maples. And I watch it. We go on walks in February, and I watch it, and it's just a great indicator tree for me to kind of get a sense of the spring. It's very different out here. Do you get good honey out here? What are your main crops? Ma'am, what are some of your main crops out here? Or your main sources of honey? I'm sure it's mostly wildflower that you're getting. Linden? Yeah. Gotcha. Are there a lot of crops out here that beekeepers are using as a source of nectar? Okay. Okay, a little bit of alfalfa. Great. Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Man, it's a different area. And you really have to think about that. So much of your beekeeping is driven by the the area that you find yourself keeping bees in. We have the luxury here of not having to worry about small hive beetle. I'm assuming that's true for you in this part of the state as well. Man, if you lived in the southeast, that would be on the front of your brain throughout your entire year's management system. So as you're finding yourself in a particular geographical area, that geographical area is definitely going to drive, or it should in some ways drive, some of the management decisions you make. And for me, that's going to transition right to my talk here. I live in a metro area. I started out as one of those idealistic beekeepers. Oh, sorry, here's my plug. That's me. We're Flower Street Farm. We sell honey and products from the hive at markets. But I started out as one of those idealistic treatment-free beekeepers. Are there any treatment-free beekeepers out here? I am not judging. My goal is to get back to becoming a treatment-free beekeeper. But I've learned that as a new beekeeper with a colony of 3 colonies in a metro area full of a population of bees that I can't control, that's an area, a geographical area, that would be tremendously hard for me to do anything treatment-free, even if I had treatment-free stock. I did that thing where I bought 3 packages in the beginning, and I said, I'm going to be a treatment-free beekeeper. I'm not going to treat my bees. My bees survive out in the wild all the time. They do it out in the wild, right? But what I came to realize is, yeah, but they die out in the wild all the time too. We just don't see that. They die in trees, and wax moths clean them out, right? We don't see that process. Yeah, they live out in the wild, but they die out in the wild too. So I quickly learned with a sample of 3 colonies, as I was autopsying those dead-outs, I saw the frass on the side of the cell, that mite poop that they put in there. I saw those larvae, those pupa emerging from the cells with their proboscises sticking out, dying as they're trying to emerge from the cells. And I went, gosh, treatment-free, man. It's not going to work. At least not here, not for me, not now. So I grasped onto the IPM pyramid. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the IPM pyramid. It's something that's in all forms of agriculture, not just beekeeping. That idea of different forms of intervention from, I even bought a handy little laser pointer. My cat's going to be so happy with me later. The cultural, so the idea is this. These are all different, and I apologize, I can see you can't read that very well, so I'll walk you through it. The idea is that these are all different types of preventions, and I'm going to focus on Varroa, obviously. There's different pests we can talk about, but Varroa is obviously the big one and what I'm going to focus on. Now, the interventions, the level of interventions are more and more impactful to the colony the higher up you go. So the cultural ones, gosh, I even have to look at the screen to read these, I apologize. Site selection. Okay, I could figure that one out. I could do site selection. The other one is hygienic and mite-resistant queens. There it is, right there, one of the foundational pieces of that pyramid, right? One of those blocks at the base of the pyramid. But it is so elusive. Raise your hand if you've purchased queens that were advertised as mite resistant. Tell me about them, sir. So advertised as VSH, not performing as advertised. Yeah, that's a common theme, right? Where'd you get them from, if you don't mind me asking? Okay, up in north, that's in Longmont, a little farther north of me. Yeah, that's the problem with VSH over the years, and a lot of the mite resistance. A lot of folks have gotten Russian bees over the years brought into Colorado with the idea that Russian bees have that data to back them up, saying that they are more mite resistant. But it's a hard thing to actually prove. You can buy it, you can advertise it, you can have a nice little flashy pamphlet, you can have all the right words, but are they really going to perform that way? It's really hard to even know from an expert because of open mating, right? The nature of open mating in an open mating situation means that you have unknown genetics that are going to go down in those generations. All this other stuff we could do, though. We could figure out traps. I could figure out how to put a drone frame in and trap mites, and that's easy. I can do that. It's about timing, late requeening, screen bottom boards. I can do all this stuff. All of this IPM stuff I could figure out as that beekeeper that had 3 colonies die trying to be treatment free, except for that hygienic mite-resistant bee. That was that one elusive thing. I've got this all figured out. I can get colonies to overwinter with all this. But now that I've got that skill set, now that I've come around from that second-year beekeeper who didn't treat bees thinking that's the way nature did it, to this place where I now have a lot more information, knowledge, bees, resources, friends that are beekeepers that I can tap into. Now this is something that I'm thinking, man, maybe I can start to get back to thinking about this. Maybe not treatment-free completely, but maybe starting to think about a bee that does have something that it can do more than just sitting there taking it. Have you ever seen those videos where you see the varroa just sitting on the bee and it's like they don't even know they're there? And you're like, how could they even behave that way? How can it be? Well, not all bees are like that. Some bees respond in different ways, and I'm going to talk about that tonight. So IPM, I hope you're familiar with IPM. If you're not, you definitely should be. I think it's a great way of thinking about how you're helping your colony and all of the things that you're doing, It's integrated pest management. I think sometimes people failed with those hygienic bees, and I'm not saying that's you, sir. I do think there are lots of bees out there that are advertised as hygienic that aren't. But there are people who bought hygienic bees and then felt like they didn't have to do anything else in this pyramid. Like they have that one block and that's it. I can walk away. I have the magic bullet, and that's not the way it works. It definitely can help, but it's still part of your integrated pest management system. Little background about varroas. They came 1987 is most agreed upon. Obviously, they don't know for sure, but that's around when anybody keeping bees before 1987? Does anybody know that world? Nor do I. The USDA was tasked with breeding a varroa-resistant bee in 1992. Bees were found that suppressed the mite reproduction. It was called at that time SMR. They didn't know what was happening, but they did know that somehow the bees were suppressing the mite reproduction. So they called it SMR. That was John Harbaugh and Hoopengardner down at the LSU lab down in Baton Rouge. In the late 90s, in conversations with Marla Spivak, who was doing similar research in Minnesota, in their conversations, she had talked to them about this idea of it being related to hygienic behavior, and they renamed it Varroa-sensitive hygiene. I want to pause for a second. Oh, let me finish this last bullet, because that's important, but then go back to hygienic behavior. The USDA did work with commercial beekeepers to create a line of bees that was appropriate for the commercial beekeeping industry. That line of bees is called the POL line. POL is an abbreviation for pollination. So as they first started finding this bee that exhibited this hygienic behavior, one of the things that was happening was they were exhibiting it way too much because they were doing artificial insemination and really focusing in on these genes, and these bees would pull out all the brood and they wouldn't be very productive. Well, nobody wants a bee like that, right? If you can survive but have absolutely no productivity, probably not very beneficial to many people. So they were trying to develop a bee that had these traits, but still had a lot of traits that commercial beekeepers were looking for, knowing that that commercial beekeeping industry is often the industry that is producing queens that ends up getting to folks like us in the smaller than commercial beekeeping industry. So the POL line was created. I've never run any pole-line bees, but I hear they're a lot like Italian bees, where they get going early in the year. Like all those pollination guys need a certain population of bees to be out in California in January. So they brood up early, much like Italians, but also exercise that hygienic behavior. And that was released to the bee industry in 2001. So you can look around and find some pole-line bees. The only folks I know that are selling pole-line bees are out of Texas. There's a company called Lambs, and they sell pole-line bees. So hygienic behavior. Let's talk about hygienic behavior. When we think about hygiene as humans, we think about a lot of different things, right? But in bees, it's something very, very specific. It's the behavior of recognizing something wrong under a capped cell, removing that capped cell, and removing the contents of that cell. Okay, so there are a lot of behaviors that might, when we think logically, be considered hygienic behavior, like mite biters, right? Have you heard of the Purdue mite biters, right? When you think about it, it feels like a hygiene kind of thing that they're doing. They're biting the mites off of other bees to help them out. But in the science world, our science terms have specific meanings. And in the beekeeping world, when we talk about hygienic behavior, it's very specific to that uncapping and removal when something's wrong in that cell. So even though I think there's a lot of great positives around something like Purdue and creating a mite biter bee, that's not specifically hygienic behavior. Uncapping and recapping behavior. Have you ever seen this in your colony? Where you get brood at that developmental level, but there's no capping on it? Notice that, because that is related. They're not sure exactly, but somehow that's related to hygienic behavior. There's times where they're uncapping it and recapping it. There are times where they're uncapping it and pulling it out because there's something wrong. And the logic they think of what's going on with the uncap recap is that they're breaking the reproductive cycle of the mite inside. As those insects are developing, they're molting too, and their exoskeletons aren't super hard all the time. So if that's uncapped and that's changing the moisture level inside that cell, that could dry out those larvae in that developmental stage where they can dry out, and it could interrupt the reproductive system. So if I see this in my colony, I think this might be one that I want to test for hygienic behavior. VSH trait set. It's considered a trait set. It's not a specific trait. In fact, there's really cool things going on in the beekeeping industry now where they're they're decoding the bee's DNA, where they're linking each kind of DNA strand to different behaviors, and they've recognized a couple of different DNA parts that are linked to this VSH behavior. There have been feral bees throughout the planet that have been recognized. There's bees in Cuba, there's bees in France, there's bees in Sweden that have been kind of treatment-free bees that have survived. Many of those populations that have been studied show or demonstrate this VSH behavior or have that kind of that DNA trait set. Say it again? Yeah. I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. They're managed. Most of them are managed. Cuba's obviously is limited by the ocean, so that one's kind of throughout the island. But and there are ones like John Kiefer has created the bees in France. There's a group that did the ones in Sweden, but they're not always great productive bees. They found these bees, but they're not great productive bees. So they're doing something to help them survive Varroa, but not necessarily do the other things that we want them to do. Some of this hygiene was found a long time ago or observed a long time ago. The American foul brood outbreak in the late 20s and early 30s created the laws in the United States that say we have to have frames that can be removed so we can inspect for disease. That's That's the genesis of that law. So as they were researching, back in 1937, this guy Park was recognizing this behavior. Back in 1937, people were saying, there are bees that are resistant to American foul brood, and we should breed off of them. Now, we still to this day have that. What do you do if you have colonies with American foul brood? You burn it all, and that's probably, in our situation, the best thing to do. But way back when, they were trying to breed a bee that was resistant to American foul brood. Rothenbuehler in 66, again, he was actually the guy who termed hygienic behavior back in 66 as he was observing. These are papers that are behind paywalls, or I would know a little bit more about these. Is anyone here in the Master Beekeeping Program? I know you are, Ann. You are, yeah. So as you kind of go down that world and start reading all those research papers, it's a lot of fun, but it's super frustrating too, where you see university dollars. Like certain people can get this information, but other people can't. All right, that's my soapbox. All right, so there are a lot of different ways to test for these hygienic behaviors, and they've kind of changed over time. One of the original ones was the freeze-kill assay. You take a little piece of brood, and what they used to do was take a little rectangle of brood from another colony that had like foundationless comb in it, so you can cut out a little rectangle. Then they would freeze it, and then they would put that rectangle in another colony, with the idea of they're looking for that hygienic behavior. If that colony is going to exercise hygienic behavior, they're going to sense something wrong with that brood. That brood is dead. It was frozen. They're going to sense that. So you put that in the colony, and you count the cells that are capped, and then you go in 24 hours later, and then you count the cells that have been uncapped. And then you create a percentage of how many of those cells have been uncapped, and that's how you get a hygienic score. They actually used to use cyanide. That was the first thing they would do. They would kill the brood with cyanide and then put it in. So it's come to this where you get liquid nitrogen, you get a little PVC pipe ring, and it's got about 100 cells in it. You pour the liquid nitrogen in that PVC pipe. It kills that brood there. Again, you put it back in the colony for 24 hours later, pull it out, and count the uncappings. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is the pin-killed brood assay. This is a little bit more appealing to the backyard beekeeper because liquid nitrogen isn't required. You need a special canister for liquid nitrogen to transfer it from place to place. You can do it. You can buy all that stuff. You can get it all. It just costs a lot of money. Here you have a rhombus that has 10 rows in it, that has 10 cells in each row. So it's 100 by 100. You can see cell number 1 marked with a dot. You can see cell number 100 marked with a dot. This is actually a tool you would use, just like that PVC circle. You would mark that first cell with like a marker. You would mark that last cell with a marker. That's so you remember your test area, because you're going to take that little rhombus off and put that frame back in the colony. Now you see here, each one of these is taking a very, very thin pin and pricking through that capped cell, killing that pupa or larva underneath. So it's the same thing as the freeze kill, but instead of liquid nitrogen, you're killing it with that pin. You can see there's no dots in those. Those, I'm assuming, are cells that weren't capped. This one's number 50, or 51, I would imagine. Bless you. So there are 50 of the capped cells that have been impacted by your pin, marking 1, marking 51, marking 100. It's also helpful to mark the frame you're testing. Mark it on top of that top bar with a little arrow so you know exactly where you did that test. Because if they're not very hygienic at all, it might be hard to go back and even find that location. This is a whole lot easier for the backyard beekeeper to do. Anyone can do this. The problem, though, with these two tests is they're measuring dead brood. Oleic acid is the primary chemical that these brood are giving off that the nurse bees are responding to. not all the problems in the colony are with dead brood. So there have been other assays that are done to help you measure in different ways. The Harbo assay, created by John Harbo, again out of the Baton Rouge lab, is where you essentially dissect 100 capped cells on a frame. You uncap each cell, you pull out the larva, or at that point it's a pupa, and you're looking for reproductive mites. You're counting 100 cells, you're dissecting 100 of them, and you're counting how many reproductive mites are in that. Remember, this was the guy, though, who created that SMR thing. Didn't create, he recognized it, he identified it. Suppressed mite reproduction. Didn't exactly know what was happening, but knew something was going on. It measures reproductive mites in the cap brood. It essentially, taking my notes. It does take a little training. It's not hard. It's not expensive. For me, the hardest part is the eyesight piece. So I'm getting one of those kind of like a makeup mirror kind of things or something. I just need a big lens so I can see in the cell. But you also, here's the other tricky thing about it, you kind of have to allow for a long untreated time to really test and get a valid score for that colony, right? I can't treat with Thymol and then go back a month later and do a Harbo test on that colony because that score isn't going to demonstrate that colony's ability to suppress the mite reproduction. That's going to demonstrate Thymol's ability to kill mites. So you've got to leave a long period of untreated time, which if you're doing your mite samples and you're keeping that data, you might be able to do. This is a website. This is super helpful. Measure VSH. This right here will give you a 20-page instruction manual of how to do the Harbo assay, straight from the lab. So if you want to feel like a grad student, going for an entomology degree, it's super cool, actually. And you can do this kind of stuff. You want to choose a frame with pupa that are well developed, just beyond purple-eyed. Starting to pigment is perfect. If a frame has emerging brood, that's a pretty good frame because you know it's going to have other developing larvae at that stage. Number your colony and your frame so you know which frame that colony came out of so you can correlate the score of the frame to the score of the colony. You can transfer frames in a nuke. You can go to a bee yard, pull 5 frames from 5 different colonies, put them in a Jester nuke or whatever nuke you like to use, bring them home, do that test at home, bring them back the next day, put them back in the colony. You can even leave them in the garage and let that brood age for a little bit of time if you need them to age to a certain time. Oh, then I found some really cool graphics. Are you ready to nerd out? Cool. So, man, these are some cool stuff, and I got a couple of different of these. So, all right, so here's the developmental stage of the bee under the capping. 7 days after capping, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, 11 days, 12 days just prior to emergence, right? So purple-eyed worker, beginning to pigment. Everybody with me? Now notice, let's look at the mites that's happening at that time as well. This foundress mite, she's the mama mite who's already pregnant that jumped into that cell right before it got capped off. She's the one that's pregnant. She lays the first egg. That first egg is always a male. Almost always a male. That second egg is a female. That male has to develop to get to a certain point for maturity. And see up here are the labels. Male dudonymph, male dudonymph, adult male. So here, at 9 days after capping, that boy's ready to have some fun. She's not, though. His sister, who he mates with, I don't know if you know this all or not, but it's a terrible story. Right? So the second egg that foundress mite lays is a female. Still not ready. She's molting. Here she is ready at day 10. So at day 10, these two can mate. Right? And there's an adult. And but this one's still laying eggs. So this is helpful because if you were to open a cell at this time, this is what you should expect to see with normal mite development, right? I don't mind at all. And if you want, here's your resource right here, Buechler, 2024.
We'll post the PowerPoint in the numbers section on the website.
This is a cool graphic too. Very similar. It's got the male mite down here, the female mite up here. This shows hours, 26 hours, 21 hours. Check this out though. I learned this doing research for this presentation. We know that insects molt. We know that, right? They're molting here through stages as well. And as they're getting ready to molt, they have a stage of immobility. It's like they're not active, right? They're almost like catatonic as they're going through that molting part. It makes sense, right? It's a pretty big event for any animal that molts. I used to have a bearded dragon, and watching it molt was definitely like a day or two event. It was a pretty big event. So I can imagine that molting that happens. I wonder if that's like a time when the mite is susceptible. Just something to think about. But that's something I learned that I thought was pretty cool. Another cool graphic. This comes from Dietman 2013, and I'll show you the resource for that in a second too. This one though, all right. It's not as pretty, right? The pictures aren't as pretty, but the information is pretty darn devastating. So here, days since capped cell. So your worker bees will spend 12 days under a capped cell. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 12. Your drones, 15 days. That's why you see worker up here stopping at 12, drone down here stopping at 15. All right, so that's day 1, just capped. This is why I bought the laser pointer, because this is so much easier than me pointing at the screen. Right, there's that foundress mite, jumps into that cell. Nothing. Day 3, she lays that egg, there's that male. Day 4, there's that male developing, there's that female egg. Day 5, day 6. So if normal development, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a foundress mite. You're going to have an adult male. You're going to have an adult female. You're going to have another adult female. And you're going to have 2 more females that haven't quite made it to adult stage. Holy cow, right? Now let's take that to the drones. Same thing up to day 12, but they get 3 more days. So here with, let me get my columns right. Right here, you even see 3 adult mites coming out of that cell on day, well, are in that cell. On day 15, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. That's why I think this is such a powerful graphic. I'm sure you've been talked to about varroa mites ad nauseum as beekeepers and how important it is. But when you see a graphic like this and you really understand what's happening every single day, that really brings it home. For me, that's a really impactful slide. Okay? What do you think? No, that cell cap opens and they all die. The male spends his entire life in that cell. He doesn't live. Yeah. So that's his entire life in that cell. This is an amazing research. Any of you master beekeepers or people minded with education and really that research minded, look up Kolos Bee Book. There are 3 different versions. Standard methods for Apis mellifera research, standard methods for pest and pathogen research, and standard methods for product research. This is the Dietman one, so 2 of those graphics came from this one. These are free online. These are amazing. Like, this is how they teach the grad students to do grad lab work. These are really cool nerd out things if you want to go down a rabbit hole. So all those graphics came from the volume 2 one. Again, it's Kolos Bee Book. You can buy those as hard copies, but they're free online. Now, all that normal reproduction of the mite is super important because one of the things that Harbo recognized was that not all of the varroa mite reproduce normally under the cell. In fact, about 15% of them aren't reproductive. That's why he started coming up with that suppressed mite reproduction term. In fact, he saw that they would uncap reproductive mites, but they wouldn't uncap non-reproductive mites. They would leave them. Something was happening that the worker bees who were choosing this behavior were passing up the cells that had non-reproductive mites. So if you're going to do a Harbo test, you have to know what to look for if you see a cell that has mites in it, but it's actually one that is non-reproductive. Like this one right here. There's no male. Here's the female mite and 2 daughters. So that's a non-reproductive cell because there's no male to reproduce with the females. This one is delayed reproduction. So at 10 days post-capping, you're looking at the development. Here's the foundress, the mama mite, so she should look like an adult, but the other ones haven't developed to the point where they should, so it took her along. There's some sort of delayed egg laying or some sort of delay in there, so by the time that 12th day of them emerging happens, it's not going to be able to create a new foundress mite coming out. Yeah. It still has a negative impact on the pupa within that cell, but consider that an impact that's just on one bee versus a colony impact of that reproduction of mites. Yeah. And then this last one is just a female foundress mite that didn't lay any eggs. In fact, they found that sometimes when this is in the cell, this female foundress mites. Now we know where to look for frass varroa poop, right? Usually it's the 10 and 2 parts of the back of the cell. It's a little crystalline, kind of guano kind of looking stuff. That's a good indicator to know that your colony died of varroa mites. That's where they normally put their feces. However, when a varroa, a foundress, is non-reproductive, she often will defecate right on the pupa. So that will be something you look for if you get into the Harbo assay to recognize another non-reproductive mite. On average, that foundress will do 3 to 5 rounds of mating within a cell. Yeah, oh boy, yeah. Other tips. You want purple-eyed or older. Again, the purpose for that is allowing those varroa to develop to that certain point, right? If you open it up 2 days after capping, you're not going to be able to identify a non-reproductive at that time. You have to let the varroa develop to a certain point. Look in the cell first. As you uncap that capping, that cell, and you pull out the pupa, don't take your eye off that cell. Because if you look at that pupa, you might go back to the frame, and the mites might have already run to another place, or you might have a hard time remembering which cell you actually pulled that pupa out of. So when you pull it out, look in the cell first, then examine the pupa. Yeah? You can see. You've never seen a mite before? Yeah, well, an adult foundress is the exact same size in a cell than it is on a bee or on your bottom board. You can, however, see if she's pregnant because she's not as flat. She's kind of more rounded than the egg. For me, is really hard to see. The varroa lays the egg at the back of the cell. We actually went up to the Boulder Bee Lab and we were trying to help them find some eggs, and I was useless doing that. I couldn't find them at all. So I can see varroa. I can see honeybee eggs. I can't see varroa eggs. Yeah. Place your pupa in groups of 5. Usually people use grafting frames to do the Harbo assay. They'll put the frame on that little rack, and it's got a place for your bars for grafting right down there. If as you're doing them, you place them in groups of 5, it's going to be easy for you to count to 100 as you're going up. Under the USDA description of how to do it, it does say to test only workers, not drones. But all of us who know at this time of the year where most of the mites are, for me that's a huge question mark. Why not look into drone pupa? I'm sure it has to do with the standardization of data, but I don't know. That's a tough one for me. But that's what, under the how to do it by the USDA, that's what they say. You test a sample of 100. If you get a good score, and that Harbo 20-page document will tell you exactly how to score what you're seeing, you might want to do another 100 just to verify that. A non-reproductive mite can often be identified by the ways we've talked about it, and those count as non-reproduction. So one critique of the way Randy Oliver is trying to create a better bee is that he might be throwing away some very good genetics because he's just relying on mite counts. And the counter argument, and I'm no expert, I don't know what's right. My guess is there's unseen consequences any way you do it. But maybe he's throwing out genetics where he's seeing mites, but those are really non-reproductive mites. So Corey Stevens, kind of the prince of the VSH world right now, talks about he'll get a high Harbo score, but he'll pull out a whole bunch of non-reproductive mites. So if you do an alcohol wash on a colony like that, that might give you a high mite count, and in a system like Randy Oliver's doing, that would just get discarded. Like I said, my personal opinion is whatever method you use to genetically select, I'm sure there are unforeseen consequences. And then there's the UBeeO assay. This is the newest way of testing for hygienic behavior. This is the one that I'm most excited about from the backyard beekeeper's perspective. The Harbo assay and the UBeeO assay are probably the two best tests that we have right now. But this is one that has a couple of advantages. It does have a couple of disadvantages, but it does have a couple of advantages over the Harbo assay. For me, the number one disadvantage, the two big disadvantages for Harbo is it's super tedious, and the other one is it takes a long period of untreated pressure to be able to get validity. Like some people are saying you should not treat your colonies for 2 years and more to test that. Yeah, and I'm not willing to do that with my bees. Exactly. And that's why this product is so exciting. It's expensive. It's about $18 per colony to test, but it's pretty immediate. So the difference is this. The folks who made this have created a chemical that replicates the alarm pheromone that stressed brood gives off. Not dead brood, not frozen brood, not brood that has been stabbed to death, but brood that is stressed. Okay, so they've come up with 10 chemicals, and they've created this product that mimics those 10 chemicals, that cocktail of that stress that those brood are giving off. It's pretty simple to do, and you don't have to give it that long period of untreated time because they're responding to not what's really going on under the cell. They're responding to that chemical that you're spraying onto the cell. So this is what the kit looks like. You get a little spray applicator. You get a little ring, just like the freeze kill brood assay. You get, this is like a cleansing vial. And then these are the 2 vials with the chemical inside of it. It's got a great little instruction book. You can see Pat if anyone knows Pat Donahue, she came over to my house last week and we practiced doing it. So here's our grafting frame, here's the ring. You spray it into that ring. You apply 3 sprays. You let it wait 15 seconds, 20 seconds in between sprays because it's got to dry out. And then you put it back in the colony. You pull it out 2 hours later. Not 24 hours later, 2 hours later. So this test is not responding to what they do in a day in 24 hours. It's responding to what they do in 2 hours. And that 2 hours is really essential to get that consistency of time. So this little card here, you put the time that you did the spray, and then you put it back into the colony so you've got it all exact. This is something a club could do. This is someone that a small-scale beekeeper could do for sure. I got to the point where I was like, well, here's my story. I bought 2 nukes from a quote-unquote reputable nuke dealer in the Colorado area. Those nukes came to me with brood that was emerging with deformed wing virus. Right? They were walking dead nukes. I spent that summer trying to nurse them back to health. That was my determination. I was not going to buy bees from other people ever again. I was going to figure out how to make bees out of my own bees. And I figured that out. And I know how to make bees out of my own bees. I can do that really well. Now what I want to do is make really good bees out of my own bees. That's the next step. So as I'm trying to come full circle, I'm not going to go treatment-free this year, but that's where I'm headed in my brain. I'm looking for those colonies that I can build a breeding program around, that I can pull those rock star genetics and keep breeding from those rock star genetics and get other small-scale beekeepers who are minded and wanting to do the same thing, because I can't flood the genetics in Colorado all by myself. How many packages of nukes came into the state last weekend? I don't know, and I can't speak to the quality of those queens. But I can say that on my scale, I can't make a huge impact in Colorado. But through the Sustainability Committee, we are trying to create a network of people who are trying to breed better bees here in Colorado. And I see this UBeeO assay, even though expensive, as a way for serious beekeepers who are ready to spend money at that point to really start digging into that and really start figuring out what a breeding program might look like in a heavily populated area with bees. It's okay. Go ahead, ma'am, and then you, sir. Thank you. No. So this kit comes with, so these are 2 5-test vials. So it's 10 tests. It's $199. Yeah, so you can buy the replacements without the spray applicator. So I have the kit that comes with everything, and then I can buy replacements. Yep. So it is 10 tests, $20, but I subtracted 2 because you get this to use for future ones there. So it is a little bit expensive. If you're a backyard beekeeper and you have 2 colonies, this probably isn't right for you, right? Learning how to treat your bees and learn those treatments and learn how to overwinter your bees and make bees out of your bees that way, I think is the right place. But for people who are looking to get better bees, and I think we all are, but people who are able to really start thinking about that and able to start putting their brain onto requeening colonies that have poor scores on a pretty regular basis. This could be something that's pretty exciting. He was next, sir, and then we'll go to you. Yeah. I did get it at the Bee Expo in January. Say it again? Yeah. That's one way to do it, but look at all the people here, right? How? Do you have those people? And you seem like a beekeeper with some experience. You probably have people in mind in this room or in this club that aren't in this room that you think maybe that buddy of mine has some really good stock he keeps telling me about, so maybe it's worth testing. Well, that's the thing. The UBeeO assay doesn't matter. You'll get a good sense of your VSH traits within your colony whether you've treated or not. My plan is for like a test yard. I'm going to run everything the way I normally do, and all of my really good stock is going to go in one yard. And I'm going to make sure, because I'm not very good at my mite tests, to be honest with you, going to make sure every one of those colonies gets regular mite tests, and if those don't need being treated, they won't get treated. And if there are bad colonies in that yard, I'm going to move them out of that yard. And if there are good colonies in other yards, I'm going to move them into that yard. That's the best I can do as far as flooding an area with good genetics, is putting my best in one place and removing my worst from that place, and then treating that one yard differently than my normal management. Does that make sense? We all do. Yeah, who's doing artificial insemination here, right? And that's why I'm here talking to you, sir, because the more of us who have our brain on this, the more of an impact we can make. That's the point of what I'm trying to do. Because, you know, I have nothing against people that are making money bringing bees in from other places, but I would like us to have better bees here in Colorado. Whether they're from California or Georgia, I don't care, or my backyard, but that's part of my goal. I'm totally with you. I understand. Yep. That's right. Sir. About every other year. I've got a couple yellow dot queens still in my colony that are going to the retirement home. Oh, I'm just beginning down this route, sir. I haven't even gotten there yet. So the best I can do is the best I can do. But I can also talk about it a whole lot to my other beekeeping friends and try to get them on board. What's that? It's impossible for me to put a percentage on it. I can say this: an isolated yard has a greater percentage than a well-populated area. So I look at the places out here and I think folks like you might have some greater situations with some bigger. No? Yeah. Yeah. Well, think about everywhere in the metro area versus everywhere here. So for me, this feels pretty spaced out. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, this vial comes with 5 tests. That vial gets plugged into here. You can do 5 different colonies. Part of the problem, though, is you have to do them all at once. I can't do 2 colonies in my yard today and save the other 3 for this weekend. I've got to use the entire vial within that day, essentially. Yeah, and they come in 5 or 10 quantities. Yeah. The 5 one is $99. The 10 one is $175. And I am not a salesman. I do not work for this company. I'm just really excited about the potential. That was the cost of the refill. $99 for the refill, $175. Other things for this one. Let me finish up on this one. I'll take more questions. For this one, the queen must be laying 6 to 7 weeks for her progeny to be old enough to demonstrate those behaviors. I can't drop a new queen that I got in this weekend and then test that colony, because those bees that are going to be hygienic are still eggs that she just laid this morning, right? So you have to wait for those eggs to hatch. You have to wait for those bees to develop to a certain age to be old enough to develop to do that. Use little smoke as possible. This is a chemical. You want them to smell the chemical, not the smoke that you plunged into the colony to get the frame out of it. So if you can do it with no smoke at all, please do. Timing is crucial. Label the frames. Testing on a flow is best. If you're not on a flow, simulate a flow by feeding a light syrup. Testing on purple-eyed or younger. So the other one was purple-eyed or older, because you wanted the varroa to develop to a certain point. This one, you want to be purple-eyed or younger. And I'm going to go back to this slide, because it's days 4 to 6 that varroa-sensitive hygiene is most effective. There was an article that came out, I don't know, it was a year ago, where it talked about like bees that engage in hygienic behavior had a tendency to get European foul brood because they're coming into contact with the larva that has European foul brood. Did anybody come across that paper at all? Okay, it does make sense, except when you read the paper, because that was done in a laboratory setting, in a jar with bees, right? So the whole colony immunity thing was totally thrown out the window. One thing they learned about VSH is the bees that are uncapping the cells are different bees than the ones that are pulling out the pupa. So, and then the other thing that they talked about with the validity of that paper is there are different growth periods of different viruses. The growth period in here is when it is not in its reproductive stage. So if the bees are exercising varroa-sensitive hygiene over here, when that European foul brood virus has developed to a point where it can spread, then absolutely it can spread to those bees. But the 4 to 6 day behavior, they're getting to the European foul brood or the brood with European foul brood before that disease is reproductive and they can get infected with it. So be careful about just reading the abstract of a paper. You can, all of the nitty gritty is in the rest of it. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the recommendation again is to use worker, but I'd like to play around with drone brood and see what they do as well. I'm awful curious about that too. That could be. Yeah, I wonder if the drones give off a different alarm. I think it's a new product. I think it will evolve. I think it will get better over time. But it's super exciting. You know, that idea of doing Harbo was pretty daunting to me for a long time. That idea of doing the nitrous, that liquid nitrogen, was just, it just felt too expensive to go out and do it once. I felt like I could do it, but it just felt too expensive to do it once. For me, I feel like this is something that someone who has quite a bit of colonies, who's really thinking about how to get a better bee beyond what's my best colony, right? Because that's what I was doing. What's my best colony? Where are my best ones that have overwintered? Where are my gentlest queens, right? My best producers in far of brood and honey. Those are the ones I want to produce off of. Now, the good thing is I don't have to test every single one of my colonies with this assay. I can still put through every single one of my queens through that same protocol in my brain and come up with my best 10 colonies out of my 50 to test. I still know which my best 10 are, right, through anecdotal notes. My next part is really to match it up with data. Those mite washes I'm not super good at, and then data that I'll be acquiring through this. All right, questions? Yeah, sir. Yeah. How do you observe it in the hive? For the UBeeO assay, or just in general? Just in general. I have a buddy who raises queens from Corey Stevens. So he has a Corey Stevens breeder queen. So these are the questions I ask him. He says you can see them pulling brood right out. You'll notice it. Now I have seen colonies pulling drones out in the spring, but I've often connected it to a cold weather event. Right, so like right after a cold weather event, I see them pulling a lot of drones out. I have seen uncapping and recapping behavior in some of my colonies, but I haven't really seen them, like that evidence of them pulling out brood out the entrance. So that's something I'm still working on learning too, because it'd be nice to be able to have that as. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, well, less than 2 hours for sure with the Harbo test. Other questions? Yeah, Ann.
So what is the life or the time frame you have once you open the vial?
It's like 3 hours.
Okay, so a couple of people could get together, buy a vial.
Do a couple at your house, go over to a friend's house, test theirs, then go back to yours, pull out the frame. So Pat and I did 5 of them in an hour. And then we had an hour basically to catch the swarms in my backyard while we were waiting for that hour to pass. But it was super helpful to record all that time, so we had that list of what to go back to at what time. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And most of mine scored squat. In fact, I didn't even quantify them. I took the picture, because that's what I'm doing. I'm taking a before picture. I'm taking an after picture. I didn't even quantify because they were so poor. But it was interesting to see, like, we zoomed it in on the phone, and we would debate, like, is this one have someone capping? So I could even see, Ann, like, if Pat were to do it individually, she might get a score of 9. And if I were to do it individually, it might get a score of 12, just because we're interpreting, is this one really uncapped or not? So there's definitely some interpretation. The gun is a little tricky too. It kind of, when you squeeze it, it goes up a little bit. So there were some questions of, yeah, exactly. So we weren't sure about how well we were hitting it. And then the last one, we did a vial, so we did 5 tests. And then the last one we did, there's a little bit left in the vial. So I'm like, Pat, let's just play around. Let's see what happens. So we made another ring on that 5th frame that we did, and we sprayed it till it was empty. Sprayed 1.5, right? So the first one got 3. The second one got 1.5. The first ring scored a 22. The second ring that got half of the chemical scored a 61. Now, how am I supposed to interpret that? I don't know what that means.
So and you just do one per hive, or
Yeah. No, that was just curiosity. That was just me being a curious scientist. Because I was like, there's a little bit in here. I might as well use it for something. So I think that little bit next time I might try on drones and see what happens there. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it could be. All these different factors that maybe we were just really crappy at aiming those 3 on the other ring, you know? Or maybe the test isn't valid. There's 1,000 different reasons, but of a really small data sample like that, it just says needs more data. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm doing this, because I've only got 50 colonies, and to create a good breeding program, they say you need a whole lot more than that because you need that sample size. I've got 50 colonies. My buddy Matt's got 70 colonies. I know another person that's got 20 colonies. So and this is part of my master beekeeping project, where I'm going out to other beekeepers and we're trying to find those gems in the Front Range. Next year, we're going to start raising queens off of them. So breeder queens, yeah. And get other people on board. I can't do this all on myself, right? So creating a team of people and opening up that size of the apiary to way beyond mine, that sample size of 3, right? Never gonna get there. Sample size of 50. But if I have, the bigger the sample size, the more the chances are of finding those gems. And then once we find those gems, then we'll start breeding off of them, connecting with clubs. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine saying, like, I'll call up Ann and say, look, I've got all these capped cells for your club on Saturday. Have your club ready for your splits to drop those queen cells right in there, right? I can't make a big difference one at a time. You come to my house and you buy 1 mated queen, that's not going to impact the Front Range. But if I bring 50 capped queen cells to a club, or I teach clubs how to do this within your club, that's part of what I'm trying to do here. And that's my master beekeeping project. So this year, education and finding those gems. with next year that idea of starting a breeding program. And breeding programs take years to do right. And again, this is just me starting to learn about how to do this all, because I've gotten to that point where I can do the IPM. I'm like, all right, now what's next? And this is the next phase of my learning, and I hope to bring a whole lot of other folks along with it. Even if it just means maybe you got something out of tonight and never think about VSH or assays again, that's totally okay. Or it could mean organizing queen cells on a club level. So hopefully all of you got something out of this on some level. I want to let you guys get to your other business, though. Thank you very much. Yeah. Hopefully in a good way.
In a good way, yes. Let's take a 10-minute break. It is now 7:47. Let's come back at 8 o'clock. We're going to have a talk from Mark is going to tell us about, kind of summarize what we learned from Marla Spivak last month. It was kind of along the same lines, so stick around for that. Tim is going to give us an update on swarms, and what else are we going to do?
Ken said thank you and tell them thanks.
Oh, Ken said thank you. Well, tell him thank you for us, too.
You're gonna just mention the apiary event.
Yes. So we're going to do an apiary event with Bryan on May 11th. Is that right?
Not this Saturday, the
No,
following Saturday.
following
May 11th.
May 11th. And we'll demonstrate some of these techniques. What time? Well, I think we talked about
Is it 10 or 10:30?
11. No.
We can discuss that and figure it out.
We'll figure.
Not get on my calendar.
All right. We will announce that. We also kind of look at the weather and see what we're dealing with as we get a little closer to that date. But mark off kind of midday on May 11th, and that's the day that we'll learn some more hands-on stuff. Yes, Bryan.
Brian, are we gonna do the whole wait 2 hours to see what it looks like after we
If you
spray?
want to stick around, wait the whole thing, you can. If you want experience doing it, and then we can push out the post pictures at the end. I'm there for the entire time, though, so feel free to spend the entire time with
Okay.
and put me to work. Like if we're waiting in between, we can do an inspection and do whatever.
Yeah, it'd be great if we had some time, we could do some inspections,
Yeah.
which would be good practice
Yep.
for some of our newbies.
Yep.
How's what at the club apiary?
At Parker Water, at Parker Road and Corset. Once we set the time,
Yeah.
we'll have Ann or the secretary send out updated times, agendas, the address again,
Yep.
everybody.
Bryan is our apiary manager, so you guys can chat. All right, very good. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back and finish up our rest of our club business. And think of your best beekeeping story, because we'll do crud cutter confessions. new people coming in. All right, let's have Mark Pomeroy come up and tell us just a brief recap. We had the opportunity to Zoom with Marla Spivak last month with Four Corners and a couple other bee clubs. It was an amazing talk. I think there were probably 15 or 20 of us in this group that were on it. But Mark, in case you didn't hear it or you just want to have a little bit of refresher, Mark is going to bring us up to date about what she talked about.
Yep. And so a lot of this is also just building on the integrated pest management that we saw earlier in Bryan's talk. Marla's talk was called The Often Overlooked Step in IPM, Honeybees' Natural Defenses Against Disease and Varroa. And actually, we talked a little bit about the genetics and different traits with the queens, but we spent an awful lot of time talking about propolis and the benefits that bees use the propolis in the hive. And for the new beekeepers, propolis is resin from different trees and plants that they bring in that have a lot of antimicrobial properties, and they will line inside of the hive. And the benefit is the propolis envelope reduces the need to activate the bee's own immune systems, and it ends up with lower disease and higher beneficial personal benefits to the bees. So you can actually encourage your bees to build up propolis in the hives by having roughed wood surfaces inside the hive. And they tend to like to fill in little gaps. Now, along with that, propolis can be very inconvenient for us as beekeepers. They tend to like to glue your frames down and kind of get in the area. And it's okay to remove propolis that is in your way of actively being able to manage your hive. But don't scrape all the propolis out of the inside of the boxes if they're applying it. There are commercial hives that are now available where they have pre-scored them, but we were looking at them and the cost of these is just incredible and not worth doing at all. You can, if you are assembling your own boxes, you can also just make some 1/4-inch scores in the wood itself. They'll fill it in, and they'll continually be bringing in propolis over time. Propolis over time will also lose its efficacy because it's basically chemical vapors that are coming off of the propolis that propagate through the colony to be able to have that antimicrobial, antifungal, and other beneficial properties. But the bees will constantly be able to be bringing them in. And another little fact is, bees tend to go through all the different, the workers go through all the different jobs based on age, and they can revert back to other jobs as needed and all that. But actually, when they become foragers, they become specialists. So the foragers will either collect nectar, pollen, or propolis, and they won't cross over. So if a bee collects nectar off of a flower, they're not also going to be collecting pollen off the flower. There'll be a different bee that will actually collect it and bring it back. And so the nectar gatherers are the most abundant. Then you get a smaller number that collect pollen, and propolis is by far the smallest. And because the propolis is so sticky, they actually have to have other bees in the hive remove it from their legs for them because it's just too sticky to get off themselves. But it was really interesting talking about the ability of natural bee resources to help reduce their disease loads within the colonies.
Oops. The other interesting thing was Marla said that they have discovered that the bees are mostly getting it from cottonwood, the propolis, the resin. In her area they were doing, and she said when she told this in a group that included some Native Americans, they came up to her and said, well, yeah, we've been collecting that, for millennia in using cottonwood buds in our traditional medicines. So it's all a cycle. Janice Cobb has some announcements to make about some, I guess, hive host opportunities. Okay.
Okay, so I have Ashley Frank, who actually came tonight. She's in the back. She is wanting to start bees in a year or two, but in the meantime is interested in having somebody put a hive on her property and watching the process so she can learn before she gets her bees. So, anybody interested in hosting a hive on Ashley's property, you can talk to her tonight or let me know. My name's Janice. You can email the club or email me, and I'll get the information to her. Okay? Thanks. Oh, and I'm sorry, she's in Elizabeth in the Western Country Ranches area. She has 4.5 acres. Some of it's yeah, is a ravine. Yeah, so about an acre of wildland. All right, thanks.
And of course, before you ever put your bees on somebody else's property, you get a written agreement, a hive host agreement. We have a sample on the website. If you have more questions, let me know. The lawyer in me gets really twitchy when you start just throwing your bees around without anything in writing. And just, this isn't on my list here, but if you are not getting club emails and you have paid your dues, would you please either contact Janice, send us to Southeast Beaks, go to our website, send us an email about it just so we can get you on the list. We have a Google group, and I can invite you to be on the Google group. And then we are also going to have a couple of other groups of just paid members that will have a separate group. But if you're not getting any emails at all from us, please contact us and we'll try to get you on that list. All right, Tim, you want to talk to us about swarms? So Tim Thompson is our swarm commander. I'll salute him. And he's going to give us an update on where we are with swarms right now.
So swarms are, as everyone has noticed, coming in a lot sooner than normal. And we've noticed that they're coming in hotter than normal as well. So I was telling Brian that they come in and they will come in fully loaded and they will build out the comb fast and ferociously. Where these first swarms, if you take a 5-frame nuke, you're gonna need to get that into a 10-frame box that same day or that next morning, whatever it is. So be wary because they will fill up and they will just dump nectar and pollen and everything.
Why is that?
Because that's how they leave their hive. They leave.
I mean, why is that different this year? Are you just saying that it's
I think
not
it's
early?
earlier, milder winter, pollen's out. We've had good rain, no harsh freezes. It's just all the contributing factors. It's almost a perfect storm. Yeah. Right. You're good. I mean, I say that. Then tomorrow they're going to be 2 frames or whatever. But overall, I mean, they'll be 3 to 4 frames on. I mean, you can see with our pictures here in a second. Overall, we've had 16 calls. Actually, that's up to 18. We had 2 today, actually, believe it or not, that got captured as well. 3 of those were wasp or yellow jackets. Very common. When they call, they just leave or don't show up, or they don't. I mean, not that they don't show up. By the time that somebody gets there, they're gone. So that's a common thing. We have captured 6. That's 7 to date now. Something that's also interesting, I'm tracking just so that you'll know as well. every single one of these calls has come in before 5 p.m. And I think there's only been one that was after 4 p.m. So if you're on the list and I don't call you, then that's probably why, because and I understand, I'm not pointing fingers or anything, but if you can't get off before and you can't capture swarms before 4 p.m., the likelihood of a swarm being generated right now at this time is pretty low. So that's why. And then also, most of these swarms are still in the Aurora area, which a lot of people don't. And again, not pointing fingers, but people that don't want to go to Aurora, it's far away. I understand that they're there working their way down. So that's kind of where we're at. Thank you to these beekeepers. You all know who you are. As far as getting swarms and helping point people in the right directions, Perry and Ann actually called in. They had swarms that were passed on to them, and they passed them on to somebody else. And here was a couple of pictures of our swarms. This one here was one that I got when I had to go drive up far north Aurora. It was about 35, 40 feet in the air. I did just ran over to this. I had the water bottle, and I had a ladder, and I had a pole, but the pole wasn't long enough. So I went and bought a 42-foot pole. This is in their backyard. So, but yes, and actually this swarm, it filled up like half of that water bottle. And then I had to go back up again and get another one. So it was massive. The hard part's getting them down. Yeah, getting them down and then trying to get the thing off and not get them into your hood and sting. At 35 feet out there in a 10-foot weight on the end of it with a plastic epoxy little knob thing into the bottom of that water bottle, I was not willing to do it. It was telescoping, or is telescoping. It still sticks out of the back of the truck, even at that. But another thing we're getting, and this is why I always get that photo. I won't ever send you out unless I get a photo. These are examples of swarms. Anytime I see them on this little column on somebody's back porch, 9.99999 times out of 10, they're getting in there. And I'm not going to call you. I'm going to call an extraction, or Larry will be nice enough to go out there and do a cone of trap out to try to get them out. Yeah, so that's those.
How successful are trap outs?
We're about to find out with one.
My first one, I'm trying, but I'll tell you next meeting.
You won't be able to say for a month at least.
Yeah. I'll at least let them know.
Oop. And so that's it. Expect more swarms. Yes, sir?
When was your first call this year?
Oh, I was just looking at that. May.
Wasn't that Tom's?
Was that mine, maybe April 13th?
April 13th, yes. We had like two that day. There was yours, and then Brian went on an unsuccessful drive around town and try to find. Yeah, so.
I was like 3 minutes late.
So. Anybody have any questions on swarms?
I have an interesting story on these swarms this week. I had a swarm when I was working at Foxville. I was working on a hive and I heard this roaring behind me. I looked back, and here's this swarm coming out of this hive. And I thought, oh man, and I was desperately trying to find this queen, so I just left that hive, grabbed my bucket that I put my smoker in, and my hive tool and started banging, trying to tang it down, because it's already spiraling up. And sometimes you can tang them down if you get soon enough. And I beat on that thing and beat on that thing, and it acted like it's coming down. And I thought, well, maybe I could get hit it down far enough I could finish the sidewalk and went back over there, and then I didn't hear the roar behind me, I heard it above me. 40 foot up in the tree. 40 foot up in an elm tree. And it's my student's hive. Well, she should have went in it last week. And she did. This is why you gotta go in every week, because they capped in queen cells at 8 days. And if you go in every week, you catch it before it's capped, and they do it in the cast. And the funniest thing is the next day, I went back out there to help her and work her hives like she could have done the week before. And her son said, well, that swarm's gone. It moved over to this bush over here. And I thought, well, that's sweet. I never heard of a swarm bivouacking. Breaking bivouac and bivouac again. I've never heard that, ever. But he swore that's what it did. So we went over there, we bumped it in a box. It's a good sized swarm. It looked about the same size. And it was gone up there in the elm tree. It was gone. So we didn't believe it, but assumed that was it. Put it in a box and everything. And the next day she went to the box. And it was a pretty red dot queen. But the swarm that come out behind me was a yellow dot queen. So you know it wasn't the same swarm. Yeah, it's an interesting story about these swarms. You have to go in this time of year, you have to go in every week.
Yeah.
You can't, you gotta be a responsible beekeeper or they'll be in the food.
If your bottom box is full, you better be splitting. Don't even.
The queen cells on the bottom of frames, I have several that are in the frames. So you really have to, look through all your frames.
Brian.
So, I know that we've had a bunch of people who've been going out multiple swarm calls, right? And I know I'm on the list, but I'm topped out. I don't really want any more bees this year. But my thought is, if we have any people who have already hit your number of colonies that you need, it seems, Tim, I thought maybe if there's anybody who still needs bees for this year, or you're looking for a swarm, but you have a day job, maybe there's something within the club that we should start collecting some names, so that if we do have someone who goes out on a swarm call, me, for example, we could temporarily put it out at my ranch, while we wait for Mark to get off the load. Something like that.
Are you still at hardware? I'm not a hardware. I used
No, I'm not a hardware. I'm not a hardware. I don't want any more bees. Okay? My wife has said no more bees. But the point being, I don't know if Ann or Tim, if you still would like a swarm and need a swarm, maybe we can figure out some place that we can temporarily keep a swarm after collected by
On
one of our.
Ashley's property.
Excuse me?
On Ashley's property. She's way out in Elizabeth.
Yeah, but Tim, would you be interested in, or Ann,
Yeah.
collecting a list of anyone would be interested in a swarm, so that maybe we could connect the swarm trapper?
The club did that years ago. That's how we got started.
Yeah.
Joe and Debbie they had it at their house. I got
Yeah.
off work and went by and
Yeah.
got stung my first.
I have no problem. We're home with the boys I'm home with the boys all the time. Once I get the amount that I want, I don't mind going and getting for other people.
Yeah.
The hardware will be the problem.
Yeah.
If somebody knows that they want it and it's a likelihood that I'll be getting called for it, or you could, once I get my quota, you can put me on a list. We'll go get them for whoever. I just have the hardware.
This would be a great use of our Google group because that's only members. And you could post on the Google group, hey, I got a swarm this afternoon. You have 3 hours to come get it before 7 o'clock. It's sitting on my front porch in the noon.
Would it be reasonable to ask for somebody to, here's my hardware, go get me a swarm kind of thing? I don't mind.
Yeah. Tom?
If you want to be on the list and you're not on the list yet, here is come and scan this QR code, and that will get you to the form. The form on the website isn't right.
The form on the website is a printout form, which You would have to print it off, fill it out, mail it in to me, then I'd have to try to enter it back in and remember to enter it back in.
This is a better way to do it.
If you scan that and it only lets you register one time, so that's good. And so if you haven't gotten it, then register. Yes? Okay.
I need frames. If somebody wants me to go get some forms, I need minimum 5 frames.
You need some nuke boxes.
I've got it. So I've got like these boxes like that. But they're mine are only used up. I got 5 of them. I got 5 nukes for sale. If anybody needs any nukes. But I've got cardboard nuke boxes. But I need 5 frames. So I'm out of frames.
Okay.
I've got frames, I don't have the boxes. My boxes, the bees are all leaking out of them.
I'll do this. I'll start a conversation in the Google group and we'll do it there. Are all the people that are in here on the Google group? I'll start it there and we'll do it.
Great. All right, let's move on here. Just some dates. The apiary class we already talked about, so get that on your calendar. The summer meeting, not the Colorado Bar Association, the Colorado State Beekeeping Association summer meeting is in Rifle on June 1st. They have put on the CSBA webpage the hotel information. They don't have the registration information up yet. I'm sure that will be any day now. June 5th will be our regular meeting back here. We'll have a refresher on how to use an EpiPen from our nurse and board member, Christy. We'll have some breakout discussions on how to inspect. And this is very important. I want you to come up with your very best embarrassing beekeeping story. And it can be a repeat, okay? Because if you've already told it, that's fine. We are going to have the representatives from the Rust-Oleum Corporation here at that meeting, and they are going to video, if you're willing, they will video your story. They're going to use it in some kind of publicity campaign. So I'm sure you'll have to sign all sorts of releases and whatnot. But they did donate a whole case of this stuff to us this year because I told them about how we use it, and they were very excited about that. And then don't forget, August 4th is the Honey Festival in Parker. If you want to sell honey, the vendor form is on the Parker Arts website right now. I know Diane is going to be getting together a sign up for people to volunteer for our booth. It's always very well attended. I'm on the committee for the town to plan it, and I just got the statistics. Last year there were over 3,000 people that came through the festival. So you're going to sell your honey if you want to sell honey. But it's a great outreach for us to do as a club, for our club booth, to just educate. Yes, ma'am. Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully. The question was, are we going to have an observation hive? Excuse me. And we're going to try to do that, yes. Also, the town is buying 2 deep boxes for our apiary, and one of the things that's going to be at the children's area is the children are going to put their little thumbprints on it with yellow paint and make little bees, and it will be really cute. So we'll have some really cute hive boxes out there. All right, it's time for Crud Cutter Confessions. And yes, ma'am. Yes. Actually, last year, so it was Cindy or Christy talking about a festival where they did honey tasting. Actually, last year, what we did at Parker was each vendor that was selling honey had honey tasting of their honey. And as people walked into the venue, they got a token. And so they would go around and test all the honey, and whichever one they liked best, they gave that vendor a token. And then at the end, that vendor got best honey taste. And it was one of our members. It was the 2 beekeepers. What are their names again? The Pruitts. So I was very happy about that. I'm going to start out Crud Cutter. You don't have to vote on mine. But, you know, I'm a devotee of the Snellgrove board, having learned it from the best, Pete. Go Snell Grove board, right? So I decided this year I've got so many hives, but I'm going to learn. And so I did a Demarest split. I did a Snell Grove split, and I did a walkaway split. Well, I get into my Snell Grove the day that I should be able to see queen cells. There's no queen cells. That's weird. I found one queen cell, but it was open, and I thought, did I miss a queen cell when I put those frames up there? Were they already making a queen? Okay, I messed up. I came back a week later thinking, I'll find eggs, we'll see something, some evidence of a queen. No evidence of a queen in that box. That's weird. I decided to do a little more exploration. I take off the top box, I take off the Snell Grove board. The next thing down is the honey super, which is chock full of brood. So I think what happened was, I think the door, she may have been out on her mating flight the day I switched the doors, and it just happened, and she came home and just went straight into that honey super. So that was a mess. Who has a story for Crud Cutter Confessions? Yes. You got to come up here if you're going to tell a story. You got to come up and talk to the microphone. Well, you got to wait till you get up here and talk in the microphone. Got to be.
Thank you, by the way. I appreciated it. And I didn't know you were supposed to take a Jeep or a nuke or anything. So I had a thermos because I'd been watching this bee guy in down south. He's with the apiary and an abbey and everything. It's Mr. Ed or something, and he always takes a thermos. A thermos? Yeah, he does. So I'm thinking, yeah. I figured if it's good enough for him, I could do that. So I took the cube and I put it in there, and I had the drain blocked off with some screening so they could have air. And then I just figured I'd shut it in and be fine. Well, I'm driving home, and this lady cuts in front of me. I put on the brakes, and I'm like, okay, everything's fine. And I look back, and I've got all these bees lined up on the back of the thermos, just like dogs, watching where we're going. Where are we going? Where are we going? What are we doing? Didn't fly through the car, didn't do anything, just riding like dogs.
Beekeeper's best friend. All right, who has another story? Who has a story, an embarrassing beekeeping story? Oh, come on. Yes, come on up here. One of the reasons we do this is so that you new people can understand that you could be doing this for years and years and years, and you still screw up. And it's okay, because we're human beings.
So this was my second season with bees, and I always had Joe, you guys know Joe and Deb, come out and mentor me. We live way out east, and so he would come out and help me. And every time Joe would go in my hives with me, I would get stung. And so me, in skirt and leggings, we went into the hive, and he got them going so bad, and I got stung not once, but that little girl brought in 5 more. And they don't know where to go when you're in a skirt. Well, I had leggings on, and I thought I was safe, and I was not safe. So I'm walking around, and Joe's like, "Are you done?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm done, Joe. That was it. So I don't know how funny that is, but for me it wasn't funny. But anyway, I get teased. Kenny will say something like, yeah, in a skirt. So that's my story.
All right, beekeeping in skirts. All right, any other embarrassing beekeeping stories? Tom? You have to come up here. You cannot do it from back there. You just can't. That's part of the rules. That's right.
Tim called me Tim called me this week. He said, "Hey, Tom, I got a swarm." And he said, it's a beekeeper who's lost his bees swarmed on him, but he doesn't want the bees, but he wants somebody to come and get them. Okay, and I went, "Oh, wait a minute, Tim. Is this real? I mean, come on." this guy, I'm going to get him out of the tree for him and whatever, and he's going to want him back. So he said, no, the guy seemed pretty nice about it. So I go over to this guy. He's an airline pilot, and sure enough, his hive is probably like where the front door is, okay? And up about, and it was more than 20 feet. It was up, it was way up there. And, but the guy comes out, and I said to him before I left home, I said, well, if they're up that high, I said, are you a beekeeper? Would you mind helping just maybe hold the ladder or something? I don't care, but I might need some help. And the guy says, yeah, I'll help you out. So I get there, he's drinking his coffee, and he shows me the bees and shows me his hive around the corner. So I get the ladder set up, and I get pole with I got the 5-gallon bucket, the water bucket on it, and my pole extends to about 18 feet, and I'm 8 foot up in the tree. And like I tried to tell you guys, you take your pole, reduce it down to as short as you can, at say 6 or 7 feet up on the ladder, figure out where it's gonna, when it's empty, because it's real heavy, and you figure out where that spot is. And then you go back up, extend your pole, go up to your bees, and your bees are hanging up there. And for you newbies who've never done a collection, you put the bucket underneath the biggest collection of bees, and you pop it as hard as you possibly can. You have to have energy when you do it. So you pop it, and it drops into the bucket. Slide it down in your hands. When it gets to that spot that's your measuring point, you just tip it over there to one of your Newport boxes like this. That's exactly what I have. And I only put 2 on the sides, leave the middle open so your bees can go in there. I drop the honeycomb in there, so when I put the top ones on, I don't crush everything in the bottom because they're all messed up down there. And, but when I first, so the guy's gonna help me, and this pilot guy, Mike, he's a great guy, and he's got shorts on. And I went, that's all you want? You don't want to put long pants on? And no. He said, I'm fine. I said, okay. And so when I popped those bees, just FYI, if you guys have ever read, what's the name of that guy, Bee Democracy, who wrote that? Shaw? Tom Seeley. Tom Seeley's book on bee democracy. He'll tell you the story that bees can't fly until they warm up the wings. I don't know if you knew that or not, but read Seeley's book and you'll learn that. So when you have bees up in a tree, they can't get going when you pop them. They're just going to fall straight down on you. They're not going to fly away right away. Only the ones who have been flying around can do it because their muscles are warmed up. I must have had 400 bees fall on top of me and on him. Well, guess who got stung about 14 times? The guy giving away the bees, not me. I'm 8 feet, I'm 6 feet up in the ladder. He's on the ground. Guess who got stung? He's wearing shorts. So anyway, I thought it was kind of funny. He's a beekeeper, should know better, but he didn't seem to mind much. So, but he was really a nice guy. He was happy the bees got away. I showed him how bees don't have. You just open this up, and the bees will just march in. If you have the queen inside this box, you open this up, set it down on the ground. You take this thing, piece you miss, and the bees will all climb inside there. I sent Tim multiple pictures of how that all works. So, anywho, that's my little funny story.
All right. Beekeeping in shorts.
Bryan, did you have one? That's right. True confessions guy.
So this was a swarm call story, and it was pointed out to my teenage son who was sitting in the truck the entire time how this interaction looked from a third person's perspective. My son, the teenager who wants nothing to do with bees, right, who sat in the truck the entire time with the windows up. So it was like Highlands Ranch. I get a swarm call, and I think it was like neighbors who were beekeepers together. So there was a swarm already caught in a tub with a lid on it, and those folks weren't home. But the neighbors who they bee-kept with were home. So I get the address, and I see the box right there, and I have a nuke box, and I basically just open the box, dump the bees right onto the ground right in front of my box, and watch them walk in. But in that process, I was in t-shirt, not a t-shirt, a button-down, like a summer short sleeve shirt, shorts, flip-flops, that kind of thing. And at one point, a bee had gotten in my shirt. So as I'm letting those bees do their own thing, because it takes a little bit of time, I walk away a little bit. I start unbuttoning my shirt, and there's like a little kid riding his bike around. And I'm like, hey, kid, is your mom home? Because I want to talk to the lady about picking up the swarm. So my son proceeds to tell me Like, Dad, you're disrobing in the middle of a cul-de-sac, asking this perfect stranger of a kid if, hey kid, is your mom home?
Oh my goodness. We have an embarrassment of riches tonight. So, Guy.
I don't know if I can top that one, but
Come on up here. By the way, this is Guy Singleton. He is moving up to Grand Lake. This is who we used to call all the time if we got a swarm call and it was actually a removal. Guy would take care of it. Guy has also generously donated a whole lot of stuff to the club. We're giving a few things away tonight in our raffle. The rest of this we're going to dole out over the next couple of meetings. So thank you, Guy, for that.
and I think I've got 14 more of those boxes and a case of 100 count frames. So if you're short, you know where to come. But for you newbies, when I have 10 acres, and a friend told me, you've got land, you should have bees. So I bought all the stuff, and when I called him back, I said, I've got all my stuff, where are my bees? And he said, well, you have to order them. Of course, it was too late to order them. So I go back to him, and I said, I've searched the web, I can't get bees. I'll have to wait until next year. And he said, no, you can catch them. And in my mind, he says, in bushes and things like that. I'm envisioning like fireflies, you get a jar and you start catching bees one at a time, And he said, no, you catch them in swarms and you do removals. And that led me into, because I work construction, roofing contractor. I always traveled with a 40-foot ladder, so typically comparatives would call me on the high stuff and that sort of thing. But in doing a removal, and this was in Colorado Springs, we were busy cutting in and everything was going fine, no problems. We decided to take lunch. So, and normally, like these Velcro straps, you keep those around the bottom of your legs so that nothing crawls up. And so I am having lunch with two of the guys that are helping me because this was a 2-story job, siding and everything pretty big. And so I'm just sitting there and I realize something or some multiples actually are climbing up my pant leg. So we're in the front yard, we're kind of resting against the tree. The next thing you know is my customer sees me standing up and ripping my pants down, standing in my underwear, swatting these bees out of my crotch. But
I wish the Rust-Oleum people were here tonight. This would have been great. And I'm sensing a theme, clothing. All right, let's go ahead and vote for who gets this bottle of Crud Cutter. We've got bees in a thermos riding in the back of the car like a dog. Clap for that. We've got trying to get bees in a skirt. We've got Tom with the guy in the shorts getting tons of swarms, getting the swarms all over him. We've got Bryan, using the beekeeping swarm as a, what shall we say, a pickup opportunity. Picking up more than a swarm. And then we have Guy, who is doing the whole, what was that, the full Monty thing in front of the swarm. I am the judge, and the judge's rule is final, and I think we give it to Bryan tonight. All right, thank you. All right. one more thing, then we'll do a raffle. Doug Wilson is here. I saw him. Did he leave already? I guess he left. Doug Wilson is our equipment manager. Just remember to keep his number. Take a picture of that. This whole PowerPoint will be posted on the web, on our webpage, so you can get that. But if you do want to check out equipment, he's our guy. Let's go ahead and do the raffle.